Hello folks and friends, and welcome back to my channel. So yeah, this is finally time for us to go over the much requested Stolas from Helluva Boss. Since I started to do some has-been hotel fan art dolls last year, a lot of you guys have been asking for it, so here goes. Stolas is, well, he's one of my favorite characters out of all VFZ Pop series, and he's my fav in Helluva Boss for sure, along Moxie, so it was a no-brainer. I knew it was going to happen. I'm sorry though, this took a long time, and I guess a lot did happen in my personal life, so yeah. Also, my hands. They have been hurting a lot, and they are super dry, partly due to the weather, and partly due to some stress, so yeah, I had to contend with that too. Also, of course, I'll have some issues with some parts of the footage, and I try to include as much as I can, hoping the quality is not too bad though. I wouldn't say it's good, but yeah, doing my best with what I have on hand. So, with all of that out of the way, yeah, let's start. For Stolas, I chose a Lagoona Blue Monster High doll. I went with the original articulated body, but I swapped the head for one of the non-articulated, more recent reboot dolls. I did that because on these, the sculpt of the face is not as pronounced and they look a bit more round. I did the same with Alastor and Angel last year, in case you wonder. Then I use my Dremel tool to cut the body apart because he of course will need heavy body mods. I'll walk you through these in details a bit later though, but that gives you an idea. I did also change the shape of the nose to be a bit more bird-like. And for stability, I glued a piece of Warbler thermoplastic inside the head to make sure the clip that I used would not pop from the vinyl moving. I did so by making sure to not compromise the neck hole pliability, so yeah, much like I did with the Alastor last summer, which I show a bit more on camera. Then I used a touch of super glue to glue the top of the head back on. I then prepped the head for the face-up by painting the skin white and the scalp black. I also sketched these features to help me with the whole process. The head was then primed with 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear Sealant, making it able to take the pigment. I started the process like usual with my soft pastels. First thing I did was to use a warm grey mix of grey and brown to contour his face a little bit. I am giving in a new jawline shadow among other things. Then I moved to the eyes, and I usually love putting a lot of blushing on there and on the cheeks, but I tend to go a little bit lighter on male characters, and I used a bit more orange than pink this time. I also started building colors to get this whole daddy a smoky eye look. Folks, if you have not watched Helluva Boss, then what are you doing? Okay, I know, it's dark humor, for sure it's not for everyone, but it really is an absolute masterpiece. Also, I know it's been a while, but that last episode, my poor heart, I mean, I wanna hug Stolas and Blitz so much, so damn much. Stolas as a character is, well, I adore him, what more can I say? He has his flaws, but also many layers of goodness, and he's super entertaining and really cute. I'm not sure what will happen to him in the season finale, but I hope nothing bad, and wishful thinking, I sure do hope that this statement doesn't age badly. We need more jelly sandwiches moments now, do we? So yes, as you can see on screen, I'm kinda breaking one of my own doll rules there, but yeah, I'm bringing a lot of black early on. Stolas' face was not as intense and complex as some other that I did, so I felt comfortable with it. It's very minimalistic and black and white in some places. I still took my time to try to blend the color as seamlessly as I could and keep it clean and fresh. Smoky eyes, I think, on dolls are deceptively hard. You want all the shades to show, you want it to blend enough, blend well, and you want to keep the right shape along. So yeah, a lot of work and a lot of slow work. I mean, I wanted to go slowly and make sure it was exactly like I wanted. I still managed to not get it as symmetrical as I could, judging by some comments, but I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I saw it. I tried to rectify it later on, but I guess the struggle is just so real for me. I'm not taking it badly, it's just a fact. I'll do my best to improve. I'm a perfectionist after all. Constructive criticism is good, it's really good. Keep it coming. As long as you are respectful, I welcome it with open arms. At this stage, I think it's a good moment to add this disclaimer. This doll is not made to be a perfect carbon copy of the character. I am making Stolas in my style, and I will take artistic liberties throughout the whole process. Like here, those little triangles, they are more subtle in the original design, but I like them this big, so I went for it. Same with the eyeballs, where I am hinting irises in a very subtle way. If you wanted something perfectly lore accurate, then I'm sorry to say that my series might be not for you. And, you know, it's okay. I took liberties with all the characters I made so far because, yes, I have more of these. I made Angel Dust, Alastor, Charlie, Vaggie, and Cherry Bomb from Has-Been Hotel. Check them out if you're interested, and tell me what you think. I'm not the best at keeping up with my comments, but I do read every single one of them, and I'm always open to talk. You could even slide in my DMs on Instagram if you felt like it. I'd love to interact with you all. When I'm done with the pencils and the pastels, I switch to paint. I use a mix of watercolors and gouache paints. Using water-activated pigments, I think make it easier to blend and erase mistakes, even if, well, I agree, acrylics is often more opaque. I absolutely love this step, and this is where I try my best to add texture and fine details a bit everywhere. I especially love doing the eyebrows and all those eye shines and details. It's really cute. I think it makes the whole piece come together. I also love using those tiny brushes. I bought them as nail art brushes, which is arguably cheaper than going for the smallest ones I can find at my local art supply store. This hobby does not have to be extremely expensive. I've developed a lot of tips and tricks over the years for that, and yeah, it's really helping. If you want me to share a few of those with you, you can always message me or leave me a comment, or maybe I should do a video about it. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Ah, I really love that face up. I think I need to do more dark and god projects. Okay, fluff time. For Stolas' hair, I used some 100% acrylic yarn. I know it's technically more grey than black, but I wanted the top of his head to be really dark first. To process the yarn, it's simple. I start by cutting the strands, at least double the length you want to finish with, and then I unravel them one by one. And then I bundle them up, placing them on a plastic clothing hanger. Then I go and brush them out, starting by the tips and moving up. And then I flat iron them to give me some really realistic and luscious hair. I hate making glued wefts because I have no patience, so I did not bother. I glued the strands directly on his head with some Mod Podge, which dried surprisingly fast compared to regular PVA glue, what I'm using usually. And yeah, I'm going for a precise clean edge here, so I'm gluing the strands facing down, as I plan to slick them back later when styling. Okay, well, I have no idea why this part was not filmed properly, but The rest of his hair, I went with a mix of black blended with some white. I actually realized when making him that I was out of grey yarn. It's a bit stripy, but it gives him a sophisticated silver fox kinda daddy look, so I'm actually kinda living for it. I framed his whole face with it and covered the back completely too because, well, he's kind of fluffy all over after all. He's an anthropomorphic owl and not a human. And also, tying the hair like that helped me kind of get starting with the styling. As for the haircut, I went in very slowly with an eyebrow razor. It's a bit awkward to do it on camera, but you can get the gist of it, I believe. When that's done, I use a heated butter knife to press some edges flat. I heated it with my flat iron off camera. And that small short strand at the front of his face wasn't planned, but I kind of adopted it at this stage. I also use a tiny bit of gel to help it stay in shape, and you see my result, and considering how hard I find styling short hair and hair in general, I see this as a complete win, and I'm proud of this though. I can also now give him a second pair of eyes that I made in polymer clay, and, well, I just glued them in place. Okay, so now it's time to look at the body. I did film myself reassembling it, but that footage is absolutely unusable. I apologize for it, really. I will still walk you through what I did, though. Also, I know it's not perfectly smooth, and I honestly ran out of patience with it, with my life being a bit chaotic at the time. It was my choice not to mind it, so now. Stolas had some cuts a bit everywhere to remove some feminine curves and elongate his body. I also repositioned part of the legs from scratch. I used my Dremel tool to sand and cut, then I reassembled him using wires and hot glue, then a bit of aluminium foil to build the legs back. Then I sealed everything with epoxy clay and let it dry completely before sanding a final time and painting. I had in mind to sew his clothes directly on his body, and as to not fight with it too much again, I did not mind the imperfection as they would ultimately not show. And this was important at the time because holding on to perfection prevented me from feeling like I could progress on this project, and because I dreaded adding more clay, waiting and sanding endlessly, and in turn it just frustrated me and I decided to let go a little bit, so yeah, so I could have a little peace in my head, because sometimes I just get so caught up in there. I hope you understand. As for the hands, I used some hot glue to elongate the fingers in a claw-like manner, and I gave it a coat of Mod Podge before the painting just to make sure it would stay in place. Those feathers took forever to come in the mail, but I finally got them. And I used some wire and hot glue, and I went in to fashion him a tail. I also trimmed some pieces, shorter pieces of the feathers, just to give him his beautiful chest fuzz. So if you wonder why he has a hole on his bow tail, well, that's because the tail's going to go there eventually. Now the clothes, the art part. Please excuse a messy line of fray check around the edges there. I made those pants with two different fabrics and they did not have the same texture and the same stretch, and it was a bit hard to do. For that I used the pattern that I fashioned last summer for Alistair's pants, just to get the right fit around the hips, so since both of them had the bodies modified to look a bit less curvy. And of course, like usual, I am hand sewing absolutely everything because I do not own a sewing machine. I finished the pants by sewing in them on the doll using what I think is called a ladder stitch or invisible stitch. I tend to also use that along the hem sometimes to tighten the fit of some permanent clothes, and I think the effect is there. When it comes to the top, I was a bit wary of adding too much bulk with too many layers of clothing, so instead of a dress shirt and a vest, I added black sleeves to a red top. And with some ribbons and pearls, it is pretty much done. I made a pattern for his cape with some paper towels first to test the fit. It's a bit more pliable than paper, so it's a really handy trick with some designs. As for the fabric, I chose this one. It's a suede, I think, but unsure. It has different shades of red depending on the side, and I thought that would fit the design pretty well. I used my fabric scissors to cut two shapes for the cape, thinking at first about doubling it to IDMs. The fabric was friable and I do wanted a clean edge, though it occurred to me shortly after that the way the bottom is shaped would be really hard to make crisp and clean with two layers turned inside out, so in the end I decided to go with only one and try to keep the edge clean with a tiny bit of fray check. That's also why I left some allowance here and there, just in case I needed to trim a bit more. The fray check glue that I use is still visible even when dry on this fabric. At the end, I decided to still hem the sides, trying to keep it as neat and clean as possible. I also added some stitches at the top just to encourage the cape to round around his shoulders, if that makes sense. I knew I would add some fur on top of that and it would be hidden from view, so I went for it. Talking about the devil, pun intended, this is the faux fur that I used. It's not the best, but I was able to shape it decently. I added a trim of fur with the strands oriented up this time, just to make the collar, and I joined those pieces together by sewing them. Now then, before I could add it to the cape, I went in with some diluted paint and started adding the grey spot you can see on Stolas. Then it was finally time to sew the fur on the cape. I went along the same seam line that I made join the two pieces of fur together, but this time along the top of the edge of the cape. Stolas is also wearing gloves, so I made them using a piece of faux leather lined with a bit of fur. I painted those black, of course. with the hands already black, it gives the illusion of fitted gloves. As for that gold closure on the cape, I simply painted a little braid that I made with ribbons. Yarn could have probably done the job also. So yes, I took artistic liberties with the shoes too, did not want the bird feet. I would have loved to give him boots, but I did not have any on hands and I decided to give him stylish heels instead of making something from scratch. To be honest, I kind of like the fact that these don't have heels. I think it kind of fits the shape of the body well. Also, I think that these shoes belong to a Gigi Grant Monster High doll, originally. Anyways, I removed the tip because it wouldn't fit the concept really, and I decided to give them a simple paint job. I did take some time to sand the tips just to make sure that it looks like they were made that way. So far so good. I think we have most details down now, do we? Okay, for his hat. I started playing with shapes cut out of craft foam to give me an idea, taping them to look at the proportions and adjusting them to make sure the pattern was exactly like it should. Of course, that also meant that I needed to try it on to make sure that it fit and to hide the extra pair of eyes as they show on the hat too. And fair warning, that also meant that the product might look a bit comically large, but that's mostly because Monster High heads are not small. I started by marking the middle on those rectangles first, just to make sure I had the symmetry down on this part of the process. Then I started sketching and cutting the shapes. To make sure the finish would look good and as perfect as I can make it, I decided to cover each piece with fabric. I am using Mod Podge as an adhesive. And that's the hat all finished. The details are in painted pieces of foam, but I did add some pearls and I actually glossed the eyes. I used hot glue to assemble most of it, but not for the top piece. I actually added glue from the inside with a brush on this one just to make sure it would not show. And last minute I assembled this tiny book with some watercolor paper, just as a tiny detail. It does not open really, but it's a cute addition nonetheless, especially from someone who never really done any miniatures. I don't have any fancy transition, so here we go, let's look at the pictures. I'll be honest, this was hard and he's not my best work either. I'll probably do some more work on him in the near future and I'll let you know if I do it. He was also extremely hard to photograph and my phone was having a hard time not overexposing the whites because of the contrast really. Fortunately, because of those couple of days I took, I was able to go and actually upgrade phones. The camera is definitely better and I hope this helps with the future. Also, just to put that out there, he's not for sale. I'll be keeping him. I'm sorry. As for the future of this series, well, I'll let you vote. What do you think about that? I'll release a poll on my community tab as soon as I can. Either way, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it despite all the twists and turns and all the time it took to make it. I'll see you soon in another video, folks. Though in the meantime, please, stay safe.